I thought I would take this on as a simple, maybe not so simple, tutorial on how to recreate this logo in a vector file using Illustrator. I'm on Illustrator CS5. I don't have the exact font, but I've used a very similar font to create this basic text. I'm using Playbill regular, and I have it in two pieces. You can see in my, first of all, I've brought in the original bitmap artwork and set it as a template layer. Just show you where you can set that. I just pasted it in and then double click the layer options to open options and shows template. Now, and I created a second layer to work on and roughly created my text. Now I want to, with that text selected, I'll go to Object, Envelope, Distort, Make with Mesh, and I'm going to choose a one row and two columns. And I'll show you why in a minute. And I can always change that if I choose to. You could also hit preview and it shows you how it's going to break that into multi-column and row mesh. Now I'll hit V to get my normal selection tool and drag this on top of my template. It might actually be easier if I recolored that text a different color, just for the sake of placement. So to quickly get into, right now that's in an envelope, and I can edit the content of the envelope by either Shift Command P, or it's probably changed in the later versions, under Object, Envelope, Distort, Edit Content. Now you'll see in the layer panel that the envelope is now can be opened, and I'll select the text there and choose a different color that would be contrasting, maybe red, as the text. Something a little less gaudy. There we go. And now I'll close that envelope again. I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut Shift Command P, and I know that's changed in the later versions, so you may want to customize that yourself. Now I'm going to scale this. I can hit E to get the free transform tool, which gives me handles on each corner, and I'm just going to scale this out so the expanse is the same. It's the same width as the artwork I want, and now I'll scale it down to where the center of the artwork matches. Now I want to bring that, gotta allow for the descender on the Y. Okay, so now that's approximately right. And now to make the distortion, lots of different ways. You can manually distort the mesh until you get what you want. I find it's useful to use the shear tool. I hit the shear tool here. It's also found in the tool panel. If you don't have this open, it's somewhere behind another tool, behind the scale tool. Now, without resetting the center of distortion, I'm going to move the cursor away from the object, and I'm holding the Shift key to constrain this to a vertical distortion. So I'm getting getting in the ballpark. And now I will I'm going to hit A to get my direct select tool and drag around. Now you'll see that I'm going to change the color of this layer so that it doesn't, so the red is, right now it's red. So if I click here and choose a gaudy green, that will work. Now you can see the bounding box a little bit better. Now I have these two corners selected. I want to again get the shear tool, and this time I'll just leave the default setting because it's going to be constrained between those 2 points. And now I can drag down and it starts distorting the text. Now I'll use the down arrow just to move it. Obviously, my text is not going to match this exactly, so I may have to go inside my the text itself to make some distortions. But I'm going to do the same thing over here to get the overall look I'm after. Okay. I'm going to again, I'm kind of just tweaking this, holding the shift key, and I'm going to take those center ones now and shift key again. I see that the word country needs to be smaller, but I selected all because that's all, this mesh is the only thing in the artwork, and then I'm going to hit the S for the scale tool, and I want this point to remain positioned stationary. So let me do that again. I selected all, I hit S to get the scale tool, and then I clicked to reset the station point, or the center of rotation or center of distortion, to this point. And now I'll move my cursor at a 45-degree angle. The further away the better, because you have more control. Now I'll drag up a little bit, and to constrain, I could hold the shift key. It's not really important that I constrain it. I'm just trying to kind of match the artwork. Okay, now I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And I'm going to open up that mesh again, Shift Command P, and now I'm going to distort the word country, make it, okay, and distort the word big, make it distorted up a little bit. Now we're getting closer. All we have to do is close that mesh and move it down again. I'm moving it down with the cursor, with the keyboard, and I can move it in very small increments just with a down arrow. I'm hitting Command K to open up my preferences, and you can set this keyboard increment to anything you want right here in the general preferences. It's at one point, it's a tenth of a pixel right now. If at any point I can multiply that movement by 10 by holding the shift key and then clicking. Now it's going to move it a pixel at a time. And that's getting closer. Now I'll move these two down, and again I'm going to hold the shift key and click the down arrow. So I'll move it. and I want to distort that again, so I'll get my shear tool, which right here for me, I like to have these all out readily available because I tend to forget what keys. Okay, we're getting closer. Now, again, if we go into the text to edit the actual font, this time I'm going to take and distort this. I hit the S key to distort, and I want to scale up just a little bit, and I want to distort this. Now, right now I'm seeing the effect of the mesh, but if I want to actually see the text, undistorted text, I can Command Y to work in outline or keyline mode, and then I want the top of the text to stay in the same position. So I have the shear or the scale tool selected, and I'm going to click at the top to reset the center of distortion, and then shift drag up a little bit, and then I'm going to view that in outline mode. Command Shift Y, or not Command Shift, just Y, Command Y. Okay, it still needs to come down some more. Okay, we're getting pretty close. I think that's acceptable. So that gives us the distortion of that particular text, and let's see, it's doing a little funky thing there, but you get the idea. Now you can leave this as a mesh distortion. It's still editable text, so even if you wanted to change the font for some reason, in fact, I'm going to get particular here, and oops, I just want to get just the I'm hitting A to get my direct select tool, and then I'm going to hit S for scale, and I'm not going to bother to go back to keyline mode. I'm just going to kind of figure it here. Okay. All right. Now, to fine-tune this at any time, you can go ahead and move the actual direction lines associated with the mesh. I just, on something that is skewed like this, I prefer to work with both points at the same time, and then use the shear tool so that they remain related, although it's a personal thing. Okay, now I see that this is coming down quite a bit right there. Personally, I feel like that's kind of I'm going to hide this just for a second. That seems a little strange to me, so I'm going to take the liberty of changing this to this new font. I think it maintains the same general appearance. Okay, now so I'm going to say that's good, although I'll go ahead and change the color of the text. So I'll come in here, and the text is selected. I can pick up that orange from the template if I hit I for the eyedropper, and now I'm going to hold shift to pick up the color from the template, and it uses that color. It actually picks up the actual color, not the graded back, or the 50% gray. If I turn off, you'll see what I mean. If I turn off that dimming, it's closer. It's very close to that. Of course, that's that's a JPEG, and so there's a lot of distortion or artifacts in there. So it's kind of a potluck which orange you're going to pick. You can tweak that. Turn that back on. Now I just need to take that same color. I'm going to go ahead and make it a spot color so that I could swap that out quickly. And right now it's just an RGB color. If I want to turn it into a spot color, what I'm doing, on the Mac is holding Shift Command and then drag that color swatch down into the swatch panel, and that automatically makes it a global process color. Depending on if you hold just the Option key, I believe you get a spot color, but it makes no difference in this case. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure I'm on the right layer and pull out a rectangle for this, and we'll distort it into place. Let's work in keyline mode, and lots of ways to distort it. I just hit the E key for the free transform, and then clicking on the center handle, if I hold the Command key and the Shift key, the Command will allow me to move that side all at once, and the Shift key will constrain it so it doesn't move up and down. Got that, and oops, I hit Command T, I didn't mean to do that. Back to outline mode. Now say we want to get that black border, heavy border on this mesh. First I want to close that mesh so that I'm handling it as a unit, and go to get the black border. I would find my appearance appearance panel, wherever it is. Do you see it? There it is. And create a new, it can be a stroke or a fill. It's actually a little cleaner if you make it a fill, and we'll set that behind the content, and then with it selected, I'm going to go up to expand an effect to path, offset path, and I'm just going to guess what the number might be. We can hit preview and see what the default it's probably 20, might be about right, but it's too big, so let's go to 15. Okay. It does some funky things right in there, but we can tweak that in a little bit. We could also round the corners if we wanted to. Probably that's too much, so we'll keep it mitered, and that's not bad. Let's look at the template again. Okay, it's doing something different here because it's a little different font, but we could remember this is live, and if you have the right font, you could duplicate that, or we could outline the font and make it any way we want it. Command Y to switch back. Okay, let's do that for fun. We're gonna change that Y in, but before I do that, in case I wanted to use this as it is, I'm going to save it as a a symbol so that I could go back to it. Right now we have a bunch of default symbols that I'm just going to trash, and I'm going to tell it to take the currently selected artwork. Make sure it's fully selected. I don't really think it matters, but and save that as a symbol. And we'll just leave the defaults. Okay. Now I want to it makes that into a symbol now, and I just want to break the link. I'm back to editable text. And so I'm not editing the symbol, I had just saved it. But I do want to go into the text now and outline the text. So now just the text is active. If I open up my layers panel, you'll see that the text is outlined, or it's selected, and I can outline the text. Command Shift O will outline the text. Now I can and we'll just temporarily turn off the layer because it's going to take a look at what I want to do. We'll just leave that on, and we'll distort this Y to kind of match this other Y. And I think I'm hitting A to get direct select, and I'm going to just delete these points and get my pen tool and just freehand in that new descender. Now you'll see I pulled out a line, but I want to move it up, so I took my hand off the Shift key and put it onto the Option or the space bar so that I could move it up and still keep it active. So I've repositioned the direction, or the anchor point. Now I'm going back to the Shift key before I let go, so that to make sure that direction line is horizontal. And I see that Y ends a little bit before. Actually, I'm just going to click here to make that an anchor, corner point, and that's a pretty small. Now this is a bug in CS5 that has been fixed in the later versions, but you can't use when you're closing a path in CS5, 6, or 7, 17 version. You first have to close the path, let up, and then move the anchor point. You can't move it by holding the space bar down. Okay, let's see if that looks a little better now. We'll hit Command Y. Yeah, that's more in keeping with the design, original design, and I'm going to select that envelope and close it again. And remember, we set an appearance on that envelope, and I want to reduce that offset a little bit. It's still a little bit too much. Let's try 13. We're not matching exactly. We could trace this and just match it exactly, but I think it's this is maybe more useful to see how to go about actually using the mesh distortion and as a creative tool. I'm going to change this some more by adding another couple of columns to this mesh distortion, and the way I do that, if I hit U, I get the I can add to this mesh, and I'll click along one of the horizontal lines and it'll add it all the way down, and we'll do that 2 places. And then I can move. I'm going to lock this. Actually, I'm just going to hide it, Command 3, and again making sure I just have those 2, and I'm going to move them up with the keyboard. Okay, and I'll move this one down. Okay, that's going straight across, and I realized that this artwork is I guess I could do this and then do the same thing up here. I'm constraining it to a horizontal by holding the Shift key. It's still going to drop down a little bit there, and that's okay for now. I've got to, we'll tweak that. Okay. Let's go on to the numbers, and I don't know what font that is, so we're just going to use a font here. It's not Playbill, that's for sure. I'm going to make it flush right, and it's a sans serif of some kind. I can see my preview fonts by going to my text. Where is it? It's right down here, and probably should have looked at this before. It's for the demo. I'll just make it a won't spend a whole lot of time trying to find just the right font, just because I don't want to waste your time. Okay, so we'll scale this up. Actually, I just soon use the scale tool. That way, I'm old school. That's what I learned on. I learned to scale with the scale tool. All kinds of ways now to do it, but let's see. Still not quite satisfied with that font. Somebody out there knows what this font is, and I don't. Probably don't have it installed. That's not it, that's for sure. Okay, moving right along. Well, that's not it either. Oh well. Okay, we'll pretend that's it. And we'll hit S and kind of distort it. And you might have, this is where I'm just going to distort it into an angle, and then we'll pull this down for the FM, and we'll just use the same font. Okay, it is a little bit smaller. S to scale, pull it and obviously when I stretch it more, it's changing the angle, so I need to adjust that. And okay, now just for fun, we'll make these X's using a normal box or rectangle tool, and I'll create the right height and width, and then we'll work in art mode, and we'll again get the distortion. Now, no, actually I'm going to get the free transform and click in the center top box and then shift and command and drag across, and then I'm going to flip this, so we'll get the reflect tool, and to flip it on its from its center, I would just start dragging and then hold the option key to duplicate and the shift to constrain. And now I want to again shear this. Okay. And I realize there may be an offset. Actually, I think that's probably pretty close to, it's good enough. Now, I could leave those as two separate objects, but in this case, I think I'll go ahead and make it permanent, and by clicking the Pathfinder Unite, now it's one object, and I can drag it over here to make the second X. And let's give this the same color, and we'll unhide the rectangle, the orange rectangle. Option command, actually Shift Option Command 3 will, never mind, Option Command 3 will unhide everything. And I'll send that to back. I'm holding the key command for send to back. I can either come up here and drag it in the layers panel, or I can hold type command shift back bracket and it'll send it to back. Okay, so we've got I'm going to group those, command G to group, and then send those to back, so they'll be sitting behind this. And I notice there's a slight difference in the black between these and the outline. I don't know if you can see that, but probably not the best thing. Right now it's 0 all the way around, and let's check this to see what, see, it's not 0, so I need to make it 0. Now that's better. Okay, we can go ahead and we have some choices. We could take all of this and turn it into lines, which would be fine, or we can keep it live for now, which I think I'll do. This outline is a combination of all of these pieces together. I could assign or select this layer and give it a new fill. Let's make it gray and move it behind again. This is just temporary, and I want to use that same offset path effect, and we'll do it. 10's probably not enough. You know, what we did here, we'll cancel that. I need to make sure that I have only this fill active, is selected, and then I will assign the effect. Otherwise, and if you just use an effect, you can go down just to the second line and look at your options. Okay, that gets us in the ballpark, and this time we would round this, and actually that's not too bad. Okay, now we could do another one. We could duplicate this and change the color. I'm going to make it, I could make it a gradient even. Don't have a specific gradient created, but I could make one easily enough with my gradient. Well, we'll just use the default gradient, assign that, and then change my offset, make it about 5, preview, okay, and we'll change the angle of the gradient. Now with this fill still selected, if I hit G or go over to the panel, tool panel, and get gradient tool, I notice wherever I click first will set the white point of the first color, and wherever I end my gradient, right now it's horizontal, and I actually want the lightest area to be down here, so I'm going to drag up and at an angle. And now I could change that to, I'm not going to, this isn't 3D, I'm just going to do a reasonable impersonation of 3D, and I'm going to set another gray level there, and I don't think I want black, maybe I do, but I don't want it necessarily be the, oops, drag that out. And if I wanted to duplicate a color along a gradient, I can hold the Option key and drag to duplicate that particular swatch, and we'll create a nice illusion of reflection. And I'm going to make that a little less than black, because I want that real black area to show. You can refine this as much as you want, and we can do some other tweaks. Sometimes it gets a little hard to distort or to edit a gradient when you get a lot of points, so it may be easier to pull the gradient panel out and then expand it. Or you can also adjust your gradient swatches right on the gradient bar. And again, being old school, I forget that, but it's there. You can even double click it to pick a color. And I think if you Option click, there's some way to get different. But anyway, Okay, so we're getting there. And we can do the same thing for the outside. Actually, let's contract this gradient panel and put it back where it belongs. And I'm going to make sure again that I have my layer effect highlighted and that I choose the correct fill. I want to actually change that to a gradient as well, and I'm going to start out make it the same gradient. That doesn't look too bad really. I think I want to pull out the white and or the black and maybe make this white a percentage of gray. It's easier just to drag it out and then reset that gray. Actually, my color, I usually have my color panel right there underneath the gradient, so I must have moved that when there we go. Okay. So it's a matter of tweaking these gradients until you get what you really want, and then tweaking it a little more. If you're that detailed. Oops. Added one accidentally. Okay. Highlight that and drag over. Alright. We're going to add one more to this, and we can do that by option dragging the original fill, or one of the fills. We'll highlight this one. I'm going to option drag and drag it underneath the first fill, and then I'll open it up and change its offset to be a little fatter than, so it'd be the 15, I believe, was the first fill offset, and we'll make this one 18 or so. I should have previewed that. I'm going to make it 20. And I'm going to reverse that gradient. I'm just going to hit the reverse gradient button here. Take a while. Oh. Reverse gradient. There we go. Okay. Now you can see you may want to tweak these things and to get just exactly the look you want. And even then, you might want to now we're to the point where I like to just take unlock my layer, the template layer, and I'm going to click here and duplicate that template artwork over to the side. Then I can compare without losing the template underneath if I needed it. And I'll lock that again. Okay. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not exactly like that. If you want to duplicate that that reflection, you may have to go to Photoshop or something. Or somebody could probably, or you could take these individual images first of all, I'm going to several different ways. I'm going to take this and set a shadow to get that dark side to the with the FM selected, I'll go to Style, Drop Shadow, and unfortunately you can't just drag it around like you can in Photoshop, but I know that this wants to be a negative number, and we'll preview. Okay. Too much. I want this to be, I don't know what my settings are. Usually the blur is going to be about the same as the offset to work the best. That's getting there. Okay. It looks more like a drop shadow, doesn't it? So that's not exactly what we want, but there are other ways to skin a cat, as they say. I'm just going to go to 1 pixel offset, and for now leave that. Not quite the look I'm after. The other thing, you can have more than one. Well, actually, here's what we want to do. I'll take that off. We want to select just this object and do basically the same thing we did to the background, except assign a particular gradient to that. In fact, if I turn this off and turn this fill off for the moment, and now actually I'm going to, yeah, that's fine. We'll assign a new outline to this. I want to have it open up the preferences for this outline, so I'm holding the Option key, and it should. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. Okay. Selecting the FM, Effect, Path, Offset Path, probably 5 pixels or so. I don't believe okay. Okay. Now see this? I needed to turn off, when I undid, I had that come back on. Okay. So right now that's orange, and I don't want that new offset to be orange. I think what happened is I didn't duplicate, I didn't first assign a new fill to this object. So I'll do that and I'll fix it. So with the FM selected, I'm going to create a new fill, and then I'm going to drag that offset into that new fill, and move that fill underneath character. And now I'll reduce that offset to be more like 7, 6, and we'll make this rounded. I think this will work better. Okay, and now I will assign it a gradient, but I'll keep it a simple gradient. So I'll drag some of these out, and we'll make this so we can reproduce this easily on the other pieces. Okay. Now G to get my drag it from the bottom rectangle up. I'm going to move that. I want to move the color swatch down, actually. Kind of force that. And I will again change that offset a little, make it smaller. Double click. 4. Let's preview that. Okay. Now, we could soften that a bit. I'm going to change the angle. I think I just now pulled that the wrong direction. Okay. Bring that down. I could make that soft by, with that object, that fill selected, I'm going to actually blur that using a Gaussian blur. And 2 pixels may be enough because I'm working in, actually 1 pixel would be enough. If I was doing this for print, I would go to Document, Raster, and set that up to probably at least 150 to even 300, but I'm going to leave it at screen resolution and set that blur to 1 pixel. Now I can, with that appearance, I could save as a style and reuse it as a starting point. So I'm going to drag this over to the graphic styles panel, and I could give it a name if I wanted to. Now I'm going to select this group, and as a group I'm going to target it, and in order to assign this style without losing the current fill, I'm going to hold the Option key and click that graphic style in the graphic style panel. What that will do is just add that style to the current appearance that the object has already been assigned to, and then I can tweak it if I want to. And I can do the same thing for just this Option style, and we'll do it for this too. This will be interesting. Actually, yeah, it already has a style. It already has this offset path, but let's see what happens if we choose Option and click graphic style. In this case, it moved it. It didn't do what we expected, and that's because it is. It actually did what we asked. It added it, but we need to extend its offset so that it actually shows up behind that black offset path. So the offset needs to be increased to probably at least 8. May take a few seconds. No, let's not 112, maybe 12. Now, I'm going to turn off rounded corner in this case and make that 15. I'm hitting tab to activate that. That doesn't look too bad. We just need to relayer it a little bit. Okay, so okay. Actually, I see that this bar needs to become part of this envelope group so that it has, otherwise we'll be fighting with this halo effect. So what I'll have to do is I'm going to move it just underneath here for the moment, and then group these two items, have them selected, Command G, and then I'm going to move this effect onto the group that was on the orange shape, and I can take, I'm targeting the envelope effect, and I'm going to take that bottom soft edged gradient off so that now they share the same effect, and this area isn't quite working as well. It's not a perfect world. Maybe I ought to save this, you think? I'll just save it to the desktop. Desktop, where are you? I usually have, there it is, way down there. I moved too many things in front of it. Okay. Well, I really need to do the same thing with this. This needs to, the X's need to be part of this group as well. So I'm going to drag them. I'm not going to, in this case, yeah, I'll get rid of the effect on that group, and then I'm just going to drag it inside this other group. And so now they share. The downside to this is I'm basically losing what I started out trying to do, which was get these shadows exactly where I wanted them in the bas relief. So that's the way it goes. We might just be better off staying with what we had. Although I noticed too, now this is kind of an interesting, one advantage of saving a graphic style. Now I can deselect all and activate that graphic style and say I wanted to have the offset smaller anywhere this graphic style was used. So I'll double click the offset and make that 3 points. Now, chances are this won't make any difference because I think I already edited that, and once you edit it, it no longer is tied to the graphic style. But say if it was, then I would update the graphic style, and any place that that graphic style was used, you see it was used on the FM, it changes that. So say if I target this group, I'm going to pull this one off and just reassign that graphic style holding Option and click. And so then I get that. There are some other things that I could do to strengthen this, but we're getting there. I could take that, target the fill, and do a little bit of, go ahead and keep that and pull. What I've ended up doing is just showing you two different ways to do the same thing. So I'm not sure which one is better. Okay. I personally think I need to go back to my original plan, so I'm going to take that off and go ahead, and I didn't delete it. If I target the overall layer, I just need to turn that layer on again, and then soften that by setting a Gaussian blur to that layer, to that fill, and I believe I can just apply it because it's a one, I'm pretty sure it's set to 1 pixel. We better make sure though that we're targeting that layer first and then the individual fill that we want to blur. And then we'll blur that, apply blur, and then we'll apply a blur to the middle layer. Now we could just use the same blur if we click on it, hold the Option key, and drag down to the second fill. Get the same, just duplicate that blur. And I want to edit this gradient. I want to put a white in here. I've lost my angle. I want to reassign this angle to start, in this case, I think at the top and go to the bottom. Or maybe the other way. Okay, make those less than white, and change my Gaussian blur. Looks like it's more than 1 pixel. It needs to be 1 pixel. Okay, that is roughly how I would approach this. Roughly. I know that this object had an extra fill that I'll just take off for the time being. The other option is to leave that. Actually, instead of making that a fill, or I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. At FM we have a gradient. I'm going to delete that. No, I'm not going to. I'm going to make it a solid black. So we'll just make it a solid black instead of, and then I'm going to reduce its offset to, actually delete the offset altogether. And instead of making it an offset, I'm going to make it I'm just going to move it. So I'm going to go to Effect, Distort, Transform, Transform, and I'll move it -1 pixel and -1 pixel. We'll see if that's right. I never get this right. I got it right, except it needs to be 2 pixels. And I'm moving the red or the orange instead of the underlying fill. So I'll go ahead and assign it. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, the transform, I'll move up just to that fill. Okay. And set the opacity of this, or just, I can either change the opacity or the color. And the blur, well, let's try 1.5, if it'll let me do that. Okay. Well, you can tweak this all you want, but this gives you an idea of how to approach it. Again, I'm going to select my layer, my top fill effect, and my offset, and reduce this offset again to something like 3. Preview. Yes, that's more like it. Now we're starting to pick up those insets. I'm going to make that 2, and then tweak the color. Bring this down here. Problem is with this, I'm not I'm fighting it because what looks good in one part doesn't look good in the other. So that's because it's not 3D. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing to this, just target just this, and I want to duplicate the effect that I've assigned to this object. So in order to duplicate it, I'm going to turn it into a graphic style, and then I'm going to target this path, and then I'm going to option click to assign it. That way I get that shadow across the top of that rectangle without affecting the rest of the artwork. And I could do the same thing to this section, to the X's. I could target that group, and so we're starting to get there. Again, it's all a matter of targeting the effect at the right level of your artwork in the layers panel, and then targeting the actual fill or stroke attribute within the appearance panel. And so in this case, I'm still tweaking this top highlight reflection, and now that I can retain the shadows where I want them a little bit better, I can play with this effect and get more what I'm after. Okay. We'll call that a wrap. You could be tweaking this till the cows come home. And if I was doing this for pay, I would be. But I'm doing this for fun. Have fun.